Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci beaucoup d'être aussi nombreux.
Good day to all. Thank you for having come this afternoon. There are so many of you, and thank you to the directors and producers of this film. A very touching movie. It's quite unusual. And now I will call on Khadmallah, who was in the film. We're lucky enough to meet her this afternoon.
Et Rawia Alhag,
and Rawia Alhag, who was on stage earlier on and who took part in this wonderful film. I'll also call on a great expert of Sudan, a great Sudanese, a humanist, Dr. Suliman Baldo, head of Sudan Transparency and Policy Tracker.
Une des ONG qui essaye.
This is one of the NGOs that is endeavoring and carries out amazing work on a daily basis to take stock of the situation and find paths for the future of Sudan. And lastly, I'd like to call on Asma, Ahmed.
Asma Ahmed fait un travail remarquable.
Asma Ahmed does an amazing job. She's an expert in the promotion and consolidation of peace in Sudan. She works backstage. Her work is unseen, but she works along with the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue. Sudan, you portrayed it in very poetic terms, beautiful terms through this film.
Nous allons parler, c'est paradoxal, mais nous allons parler de société.
We'll be speaking in a paradoxical way about civil societies at the time of civil war, and one of the worst civil wars of our times, because it has led to, as we heard earlier on, the most serious humanitarian crisis of this period. It is a civil war between two generals, as you saw in the film. They took to their weapons when civil society got rid of their dictator in 2019, Al-Bashir, and yet over the last 2 years, the only thing you hear is the noise of weapons. The civilians are there. They are the first victims of this war against civilians. They are looted, aggressed, attacked, left to their own devices. Over 50,000 dead, over 11 million displaced and refugees abroad. These figures are absolutely terrifying. And yet this film shows us people, characters, through faces, through their stories. What is left of this civil society? Can the diaspora take over? Is it still active in the humanitarian sphere to try and make war more bearable? And what is the role left for women today? Is there the option to solve this conflict? These are questions, so many questions, that we're going to ask the people who are with us on stage this afternoon. But before that, a few words about the film. Khadmallah, could you tell the audience a little about
qu'on trouve à tous les coins de rue de
these tea corners that we find in every street in Khartoum and that play such a major role in civil society in Sudan? And why were they repressed by the previous regime?
السلام عليكم أنا خدمالله أبو عباس ست شاي.
My name is Khadmallah. I'm a tea lady. The tea ladies, their place is not just for tea or coffee, rather it's a meeting of Sudanese youth, politicians, artists, and activists. It's a place where all people feel comfortable to talk comfortably. And the tea ladies were facing many troubles. They were subjected to violence, to beating. We have been subject to being evacuated from where we work, and they made us suffer because we weren't allowed to work. But unfortunately, after the war, the tea ladies were also categorized as being agents and spies that take information from one party to another, despite the fact that the tea ladies are yearning to a decent life and to provide for their children.
Oui, ce sont un peu les mères de la démocratie populaire.
Another.
Of civil society, in a way.
ما في سماع. هما الأمم
Mother for public democracy.
Est-ce qu'on va demander maintenant à Rawia Alhag?
Ask Rawia Alhag, is it easy to be?
Rawia Alhag.
Est-ce que c'est facile d'être une femme?
Is it easy to be a female or filmmaker in Sudan?
Rawia?
Rawia.
طيب مرحبا مرة ثانية.
Hello once again.
ما من الصعب أصلاً إنك
It's not difficult to make a movie or to be a movie maker, a filmmaker, but what's hard is to be a woman and filmmaker. It was very much difficult for me. The movement, to be moving late at night and to be reaching sites for the films that I'm making and to film in areas that are dangerous and with children. It was very dangerous for me and for the team that was working with me. We were subjected two types to attacks by citizens, although we had all the clearances from the police to film in the streets. And I think this is a very great challenge for Sudanese women to work in the film industry. And on the other hand, we were able to film, to create movies and films. We tried to use our phones to film, and it was easy to use them. The Khartoum film was taken by an iPhone. We were able to take most of the shots in Khartoum by the iPhone, and it was very much beneficial for us to use phones.
Merci, Rawia Alhag.
Thank you. Come on, Baldo. When you watch this film, what came to your mind? What were your first impressions? Well, it's the second time I watched this film, and I felt it was like the first time. Why? Well, there are several levels of depth to this film. Beyond the personal life stories of the protagonists, there are different levels of depth. This film presents the story, the history of Sudan since 1956 until today. We've had 69 years of independence, and out of these 69 years, we've only had 11 years where we were not under a military regime, civilian democratic regimes. Yet the Sudanese people yearns for democracy and for reform. So the fate of Sudan has been dominated by men in uniforms and by their race for wealth through absolute corruption of these military elites and their politician supporters. It's not correct to say that it's a war between two generals. It's a war between two armed factions from the same military entity, the regular army and the paramilitary army, which has been trained by the official army to wage war in its stead on an emergency basis in the country. But now the paramilitary forces have turned against the regular army. It is a struggle for Sudanese to fight for peace and justice. They're faced with repression forces that are represented by the military security establishment. Behind this establishment, there's a doctrine, an ideology, which is political Islam, Sudanese Muslim Brotherhood. They want to re-establish religious government. For that time, we had political Islam governing Sudan, which has been uprooted by young people. You've seen a lot of documentaries, I'm sure, on the popular revolution. There were young people, women mostly, right? So there is this angle, the generations we've seen with Khadmallah in the film, but we've seen with our own eyes on 2018, 2019, after the revolution, when Al-Bashir has been replaced by a civilian government, on which the army has imposed its partnership. And when it didn't work out, we had yet another coup in 2021. So history repeats itself. It's exactly like the camel turning around itself. There's a military coup, civilian regime, military coup, civilian regime, but the military still has the upper hand. Now the war is not between two generals, it's between the Sudanese who want democracy and the repression of the pushback of the Muslim Brotherhood. Last point, this film really showed the cultural diversity of Sudanese Islam. Islam in Sudan is very tolerating, it's very open, but that's not what the Muslim Brotherhood wants. They are a political movement. They are looking for wealth, they're looking for domination, and they want to make Sudan an example of their ideology, their extremist ideology. So that's what we can see in the film, and it's very rich and it's very deep as well. That's what I will take home from this. Thank you very much, Asma. What did you find more interesting in the film, more moving?
Thank you, Christophe. There were a few scenes that resonated. One was when Majdi was leaving, and I think that's a story everyone who is actually privileged enough to have been able to leave the country and have the means to be able to be safe outside lived. And I remember when I was crossing, leaving Khartoum, I remember looking at the Nile and looking at, like, this is the reservoir of all of the history, right? And one day we will cross over this bridge and the Nile will be watching and will tell this story to generations to come. I think the other moving part was also the perspective of Lukanen and Wilson. To me, looking at, and I'm struggling to tell my nieces and nephews who are at the same age, what I do. I work in conflict resolutions, why they are conflicts to begin with. I struggle to tell them the story of the war. And as Suliman mentioned, it's really, there are many narratives, right? So in a way, it's also a war around hope, against hope, around a war against civicness, and the hopes that have been really high during the uprising, that we could dream of change, we could dream of democracy, we could dream that civilians can have an oversight of the military, and that we can break from that cycle. So yeah, many moments really resonated, Christophe, within the film.
Mm-hmm. Suliman, Baldo, vous avez commencé à expliquer
Suliman, Baldo, you were talking about history repeating itself, this cycle of coup, revolution.
comment on est passé
How did we
cette révolution qui a amené
go from this revolution, which removed Omar al-Bashir, to the war, this domestic war that is happening within the army in the end. In the middle, there's been a transition where hope found a place, maybe a bigger place than ever in the history of the Sudanese people. How did we go to this situation, to the despair that we see today? Well, in 2018, it was an unfinished revolution because Al-Bashir's regime was a real regime in the actual meaning of the term. There's the army and a parallel army with the rapid intervention forces. The National Congress Party, the party in power, fell, but the military apparatus remained intact. And this military establishment imposed itself to the civilian population instead of letting them, giving them leeway to take their fate into their own hands, because that's what the young wanted in the end. So the military imposed themselves, and there's this very uncomfortable cohabitation between the army and civilians. Civilians were in charge of the executive side of things, and they started implementing economic nature. So there was some hope. There was a conference held in Paris where everybody celebrated a revolution that inspired many people across the world. But it could not last because those political and economic reforms they were going to weaken the control of the army over the country. Because military empires go hand in hand with economic empires. They need control over the national economy. 82% of the national wealth is controlled by the military, and civilians control only 18% of the country's resources. The military never left. So there was this military coup in 2021. And a coup cannot happen with two generals at its helm. So they had to solve their issue within themselves. That's why they started going to war against one another. And when we say there are 14 million internally displaced people and 12 million refugees in neighboring countries, that's the society at large. Artists, students, people from academia, they're everywhere in Chad, in South Sudan, Ethiopia, mostly in Egypt. Uganda was also very welcoming to Sudanese refugees. And now, most of Sudanese society lives in exile, and those who remain in the country are faced with a very dire situation because those armed forces that wage war against one another are attacking civilians. Civilians are the first victims of this war. It's a terrible situation, but hope will prevail. We will talk about the situation in more detail. Khadmallah, in the film, you say that revolution was a time where everything seemed possible. And for the first time, it seemed possible to talk about racial issues, racism amongst communities, and the fact that you started refusing inequality between people. Could you tell us more about this? This African identity, Arab identity that's been present throughout the history of Sudan ever since its independence. It's a reality for you, I'm sure.
في الحقيقة نحن في السودان
In fact, in Sudan we have diversity, large cultural diversity. We have so many languages, so many religions. In the Nuba Mountains, where I come from, we have so many languages. We have so many religions. We have Islam, we have Kujur, we have customs and traditions. Some people believe in culture. And unfortunately, during the Al-Bashir regime, we were forced to speak Arabic as an official language, despite the fact it's not our first language, because we have our own language as groups in the Nuba Mountains. And so this was unfortunate for us. And at the same time, we weren't able to express our identity in an ample manner during the time of Al-Bashir. And the most thing is in the street, the tea ladies were always coming from specific minority, which is Nuba Mountains or Darfur. Most women who make tea are from the Nuba Mountains and Darfur. And so during the Al-Bashir, there was the public order law, and they were not allowing women to work in the streets officially, and they would come and evacuate us, despite the fact that we pay them for us to facilitate our work. And they were supposed to allow us to work in an organized manner and instead of working arbitrarily. But unfortunately, the regime was designed to oppress Sudanese women in a manner
حقيقة
Actually, we as women, we struggle a lot in the street. We struggle to be independent. We are oppressed. We are disrespected in the streets. And all these things were engraved during the Al-Bashir regime in the law of public order. And during the revolution, everything was hopeful. We were hopeful that we will reach our independent country that would accommodate our traditions and cultures in a different manner. We were hopeful. But unfortunately, we saw the military coup, and then after that there was the war that devastated everyone, and especially women who were mostly affected by war, because women are now refugees, women now are internally displaced, and they are the ones who are in charge of protecting and taking care of the children. As a matter of fact, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say, but I salute all Sudanese women, all great Sudanese women.
Merci beaucoup, Khadmallah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your words. Rawia Alhag, the generation that carried out this revolution between 2019 and the coup is your generation. It's people who were born under Omar al-Bashir and who then wanted to get rid of him, and yet they had that only leader. So how do you explain that? How did that generation become what it became when it didn't have much freedom, ultimately? Where did it get inspired? On the internet with the revolutions of 2011? What was the source of inspiration for your generation?
طيب نحن الجيل
We are the generation who lived all their lives in the time of Al-Bashir. And what inspired us to the revolution, the great revolution of December, is that we didn't see freedom before because the situation was bad. We would study, even in education, we didn't have a quality education. And even when you graduate college, you couldn't find a job. All opportunities were allowed to the youth who belonged to the the former regime, the Al-Bashir regime. If you wanted to get a job, you needed to affiliate to Al-Bashir's regime, otherwise not. So it was very difficult for us to be employed in the government. It was difficult to live our lives as we wanted. It was very difficult to create films. There were so many restrictions, social restrictions, religious, legal. Everything was monitored. Anything that would be screened in the television was monitored, and cinema was restricted. And so for youth, for us youth, there was no hope. And when the demonstrations started against the regime in December 2018, most young people were part of it because we could see hope, that we are able to create change into a Sudan that we all dream of as youth. And we lost many martyrs, so many died, so many were maimed, and this inspired us to continue in the path of martyrs and those who were injured and maimed. The most shocking thing for our generation, it was the military coup, the 2021 coup d'etat, which destroyed our dreams, because we had hope that we could make change, and we continued the demonstrations in the streets of Khartoum and all other wilayas and cities. And so up till the war, we continued. But after the war, we lost everything. We lost hope that we changed and bring the Sudan that we want. And unfortunately, so many people lost their houses and were displaced and left Sudan. They were being smuggled. The roads were difficult and dangerous, and some sold all their belongings so they can travel to a safe place. As an example, Majdi, who sent his children and stayed in Sudan. Also an example of Jawad and Lucain and Wilson. Lucain and Wilson, who are with me in Nairobi today at school, and they're able to continue their life in Nairobi, but unfortunately their families are still in Jabrona in Sudan, and they still suffer. The last call between me and the father of Lucain he told me that everything is difficult, that they're not able to obtain food. And even for him to call me, he would fast for a day and save the money to make the call. And so the situation is very difficult. However, we as Sudanese youth, we still have hope inside us that we can make change, such as by tools such as this film, so we can make the international community see our humanitarian stories, such as the Khadmallah story, Jawad, Majdi, and the 2 children. We want to inspire. I hope that this film inspire other Sudanese to create films and to tell our stories, so as the world can stand with us and help us to stop this war, because the war in Sudan is not a civil war. It's a war that is being supported by external actors, because the warring parties are supported by external actors, and I believe that the international community can stop this war by agreements, by any instruments, so the Sudanese can be able to be back to their homes.
Asma Ahmed,
Asma Ahmed, in the film, there's Jawad with his motorbike. He goes to pick up the wounded protesters to take them to safety, and that shows the role played by these revolutionary committees. These committees continued during the civil war to work, and they became a kind of center for humanitarian assistance, local humanitarian assistance. Can you tell us a little more about this civil society and these committees that got organized and continued to work as best they could through the war?
Thank you, Christophe. And yes, Sudan has a long history of civil society, of community response, whether it's floods, whether it's hunger, whether it's famine, whether it's really community support for each other during agriculture season and otherwise. The moment of the uprising was also a moment of unity. Everyone was really, as Jawad was describing, everyone felt they had to contribute, they needed to contribute. So people rallied up to organize around their profession, around where they live, to be able to support the community and aspire for change. The structures of the resistance committees, of professionals, whether medical doctors or teachers or different actors within Khartoum or outside Khartoum. Also, when the war started, people started organizing. We see doctors and health practitioners volunteer at hospitals also to be able to provide medicine, to be able to transport the wounded, to be able to ensure that chains of supplies, medical supplies, pharmaceuticals are also available. We have also seen the resistance committees and the emergency response room step up to address the dire humanitarian situation. The level of food insecurity, as we've heard earlier, have reached unprecedented level in terms of famine in different areas in the country, especially areas that have been in the past also, going through conflict, like Zamzam camps, different IDP camps in Darfur, in Nuba Mountains, and in different parts of the country. These committees now continue volunteers, like provide in mutual aid, soup kitchens. Some groups continue, maybe not with motorbikes because there are serious issues of gas, but including in bicycles to kind of ensure that medical equipments are being transported, that doctors and health practitioners are able to move. Despite that, and these are all volunteers, putting their lives at risk. Many of them have died actually. Many of them have suffered injuries, and sometimes this is underreported because also for them this work has to go on, and sometimes they are on purpose don't publicize some of these violations that happen to them. But the risk they live under is unprecedented, and this is one of the main means of livelihood we talk about today. We speak to people in Atbara, in Kassala, inside Khartoum who still live there. And this is the only way for people to have the one meal they have per day if they can have it. And we've seen photos and we've heard and we've talked to young children, 18 months as the MSF director mentioned, but even younger than that, we are seeing pregnant women who are also suffering from malnutrition. And again, with the current global situation now of funding, this is becoming a serious challenge to continue to provide. And we have no information now at this point to what will happen in the next week or two. I was talking to a volunteer a couple of weeks ago with the decisions with USAID, and they were saying we would see the result of this in a week or two, and the result of it meaning more death on the ground and lack of medical equipment and so forth. So I think that all of these volunteers is continuing, but they cannot go along. They work in a very risky environment, and they really require a lot of media support, a lot of recognition, and a lot of financial support to be able to continue with this important work that is giving lifeline to people who are still inside.
Merci beaucoup. C'était très.
Thank you so much. That was very precise and very useful information.
Merci pour ces précisions très précises et très inédites parce que pas beaucoup de gens.
We don't have access easily to this kind of information. It's not easy to know what's happening in a country at war. And Dr. Suliman Baldo, what's the military situation today? We get the impression that the Sudanese army is gaining ground in Khartoum and Shidera between the two arms of the Nile. Is it getting stronger? Or is it thanks to the militia that it created by giving weapons to villages and tribes? Is that what has happened? Does the country now, could the country become even more divided than it has been until now because there are a growing number of people with weapons? Or so basically, is the country becoming more unified, or is it becoming more fragmented with the two opposing sides and their militia? When the war broke out on the 15th of April 2023, the Sudanese army was only an army by name. It was officers, generals, lieutenant generals, and so on. Many of those, but not really simple soldiers. So on the other hand, there was the rapid support forces, and they'd been investing a lot in communication, in the 4x4s, for the four-wheel drives. And they were really good vehicles, really strong and reliable vehicles. And the RSF managed to get in control of the capital. The capital was the first place of conflict. And then by December 2023, they'd got the second most important city after Khartoum. Its farming potential is absolutely huge. It nourishes the entire country. They also got the region of Sennar, a very rich area too. So the RSF is actually a kind of hybrid force. It's a regular one, but it's a militia too. The generals are people who were recruited during the war of from the war of 2003, and they were trained. So loyalty was mainly directed at the tribes and the clans rather than the regular forces. Then, as the war carried on, the RSF started disintegrating because it was because of its weaknesses, and it broke down into different groups. You would have thought that the army would have learnt its lesson, not call on ethnic militia, but that's not the case. They have now recruited ethnic militia all over the country, in the center of Sudan and the south as well, and in areas where they think they can gain control. And then there are the ideological militia that are based on Islam. So some of them are inspired by terrorist groups, Islamist groups, and for them, the army is a way to return to power. So militia on both sides, and the leaders on both sides have lost the control of the people who are supposedly fighting for them, which has meant that conflict has spread throughout the country. Community inter-community conflicts. And the most dangerous thing is the war on the social media, Twitter, Facebook, and so on, because there's huge war propaganda, and this has become extremely destructive in the sense that they call on the primary sense of belonging of people, that is, religion and tribes. And so there's been ethnic polarization. It's extremely dangerous. And the narrative of those who support the army is that everybody in the west of Sudan are our enemy. The people from Chad, from Niger, they need to be fought against. They are foreign forces. They want to settle in our country. And this is the kind of narrative that is being published on the social media. And this second war is even more dangerous than the primary one. The war could potentially turn into a genuine civil war. Despite the catastrophic situation that we are experiencing today, things could get even worse, which is why I'm here to say that we absolutely need to put an end to this folly.
Merci pour vos
Thank you for those explanations. Very clear, yet very pessimistic. I think this is all very realistic. Khadmallah and Rawia, you live in Nairobi. Is there a large Sudanese community in Nairobi? Do you meet with Sudanese people over there a lot, or do you deal with your life on your own? Because, well, life is hard for everybody. Or maybe there's the Sudanese diaspora in Kenya, and Nairobi is very tight-knit. What is the situation like?
قبل ما أجاوب على السؤال ده
Before I answer, I want to remind you that me and the film team, we decided to locate and Wilson, and we created a GoFundMe to fund their education. They are now with me. They are both with me and safe, but we want to support their education. And so there are papers at the door. You will see them. They will deliver the papers to you at the door. If you could please provide support to them, if you could, so we can ensure that their life is changed to better. Unfortunately, we cannot change all the lives of the Sudanese children, but we can change the lives of these two children who are still struggling and their families are still back in Sudan struggling. And I would be grateful if you could provide support for them. And as for the question with regard to the Sudanese society in Nairobi in Kenya, the Sudanese chose Kenya amongst African neighboring countries because Kenya, the visa to Kenya was easy, and the Kenyan government, in terms of extension of visa for Sudanese, it's for free. It's without fees. And so also the Kenyan community is close to the Sudanese community, and Kenya also witnessed in the previous years many events related to Sudan, including the Nifasha conference, the Nifasha peace conference. And so the Sudanese community there, they're not able to work in the government because they don't have a residency, because it's very difficult to obtain a residency, but they can work in labor, such as Khadmallah, who has a tea corner, and such as food stalls and small businesses. But unfortunately, the majority of the Sudanese are living in refugee camps, northern Kenya and in Uganda. And there's a large number of Sudanese people who live in Kigali as well. And the situations in the camps are not good, but they're still better than the situation in the war in Sudan. Yes, the environment is different. The food is different to Sudanese. Women struggle there in the refugee camps to find sanitary products. But people are trying to live and to accommodate to the situation. I give the floor to Khadmallah. Actually, when we was in Sudan as women, we were trying by the end of the weekend, we meet and we sit together and talk about the things that are happening by the government. And right now in Nairobi, I'm trying to create this as well, so as for us women to sit together and to discuss our issues and our situation in Nairobi. On the 8th of March, I tried to gather all women in my small coffee corner and for us to sit together and to discuss our issues and our challenges in Nairobi. And of course, we have lost our jobs. We lost our gatherings, but we're trying to create a new environment in Nairobi whereby we can gather Sudanese women and discuss our issues. And we're trying to create small events such as small bazaars where we sell Sudanese products, which is not to say that it's making a lot of income, but at least it will create some kind of social interaction where women can discuss their issues.
Thank you very much. We are going to take questions from the audience now. We have about 10 minutes for questions.
Elles sont bienvenues. Je vous demanderai juste de vous mettre debout.
I will only ask you to stand up if you have a question
De bien parler dans le micro.
and to speak in the microphone.
Comme ça, vous pouvez laisser la place
Also, please try to
pour poser leurs questions.
be brief so that we can take several questions.
Monsieur au premier rang.
There's a gentleman in the first row.
Pouvez vous mettre debout? Can you please stand?
Sure.
And
Excuse me. Thank you very much. I just want to make one comment, and maybe you can also reply to it, because I think it's important to mention this happens in a global context. And of course, it's a problem within Sudan. But I mean, nobody doubts that the main supporter of the RSF is the Emirates, the United Arab Emirates. And I mean, Switzerland has got an annual trade with the United Arab Emirates of 15 billion Swiss francs, and mainly in gold. The main driver of this war in Sudan is gold. So, I mean, it's not, we have something to do with it. There are many other things, but I think it's very important to mention that.
merci beaucoup. Je vais peut-être demander justement.
Thank you.
Asma,
Thank you. Then maybe I will turn to you, Asma Ahmed.
les influences internationales.
What are the international influences in the country, and who can exert pressure on the international community to try to put an end to this war?
Qui veulent la continuer.
Who wants the war to continue, and who could put an end to it?
Thank you. Yes, I think the question of what are the interests of external actors are very important when we talk about resources, obviously. In terms of gold, when we talk about the reshape that is happening within the region also, whether we're talking about the conflict that has been going for years now also in Libya, or the situation in South Sudan, or the plight for the Red Sea as well. It's all interconnected and interrelated. There are two questions also when we talk about how can we galvanize political will to end the conflict. One is the money, where how is the financing of the conflict continuing? How is the weaponry also in terms of logistic? How is it coming in to the conflict parties? And I think if there's real political will, there are ways to kind of follow the money, follow the sources of the funding, not the ones that are coming into the country, but also the resources. There are different reports of resources being still going out from the country in terms of gold by both parties, actually, of the conflict, and that the production and the export this year is more than the last couple of years. So this is one of the economic activities that is still ongoing from both sides and from both areas to continue. And these goals end up somewhere, so whoever is exporting it, that could be followed. Again, the weapons, and there are a lot of reports from organizations or where these weaponries are being manufactured, how are they being sold, and how are they being exported. But I think beyond that is really how do we look into what is the end game for the conflict as well, for both conflict parties, for the rest of the Sudanese. And this war is not the first in the history of Sudan. There have been multiple wars. And if there's no real effort, not just to provide humanitarian aid as much as important as it is, or to arrive at a ceasefire, but to really look at what are the root causes in terms of identity, in terms of the dominance of the military over civilians and not allowing the civilians to go, in terms of also the corruption that has really been going on years. So we really have to look into, yes, we want to cut the supply, we want to cut whatever is coming to increase, but even if you will stop it today, if there's no serious conversation about the root causes, we could stop a war today and it will continue tomorrow with other external actors. So the root causes and the real effort to put a dialogue and to put the actors within the country and within the region is really important and should be highlighted, I think.
Docteur Baldo, vous vivez aux États-Unis.
Dr. Baldo, you live in the US, and there's been a short peace process that was launched by the US. It started in Geneva, actually. Is there an interest of the Trump administration for the conflict in Sudan? This new presidency, what impact could it have on Sudan? Well, there's already been a devastating impact, which is the fact that the US have stopped providing humanitarian aid. The US funded most humanitarian activities in Sudan, the World Food Programme, sanitary support, and healthcare, humanitarian aid as well through WHO. So all of that stops immediately from one day to the next, especially at the time where that was most needed. So diplomatically speaking, it's Ukraine and Gaza, and that's it. When Rubio talks to the press, he doesn't talk about Africa. He doesn't talk about the Horn of Africa. He doesn't talk about the dangers in the region, the fact that Ethiopia and Eritrea could end up at war. He doesn't talk about the situation in Sudan, in South Sudan. So this administration really doesn't care about us, and the situation is very dire. Once again, a plea for a change, and I hope that Switzerland and the EU will not remain indifferent. Those are key international players. The UK said that they were ready to make Sudan a priority in their foreign policy. Well, we need a whole peace process. And the first attempt was the Geneva encounters initiated by the US. That was just a call for a ceasefire, not a peace process as such. So that still remains to be done, and it needs to be headed by Europeans, like it is the case in Ukraine, for example. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, a lady at the front. Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to congratulate you for the film. I really found that it was a work of art. I was in Sudan just before the war, so I drank ginger coffee in street corners. I had tea as well at tea corners. What I really liked in this film is that we were able to see the strength of a hope for democracy. And that was so strong, and it was shared by all layers of the population. So my question is the following. Has there been a backlash due to clanic wars, tribal wars, with all these military militia, external influence? I've seen a number of them. So can the flame of democracy shine in the current context? Who wants to answer? Asma.
I believe yes. I think we, as Rawia was mentioning earlier, we are a generation that have grew up. We went to school wearing military uniform. This was the school uniform, a camouflage, right? We didn't see freedom of expression, and we've seen war across the country. And we were still able to dream. And I think the resilience is there, the hope is there, and the fact that Jawad, whose brother died, was still smiling and hoping for a new country, for a united, peaceful country. So I think the flame is there, and yes, at times it's difficult, but we've gone through it before, and I believe with the generation. And also, that feeling we have seen during the uprising, which all of the previous generations has also seen, like my father, my grandparent, they have also lived through uprisings in the history of Sudan. So it's something that is really deep in our culture. Yes, we haven't been in stable democracies, but the dream has always been part of our culture, of our music, of our daily life. So I think, yes, and I'm not trying to sell the dream, but I think it is part of who we are as Sudanese in general.
On va prendre une dernière question.
We'll take a last question over there. Sir, please. Or maybe we'll take two questions in one go. Sir, over here, and then Madam over there. Please be brief, because we're running out of time.
Shukran. Thank you. My name is Mohammed Saleh. I'm from Mohammed Yassin. I'm from civil society in Sudan. Thank you very much for this work.
And I hope this work is going to bring the attention of the world to the war which is happening in Sudan. Actually, in the address, it says that it is a forgotten war, but I don't think that it is forgotten war, because with the media of today, everyone knows that there is war, and it is the second year, and the first flows of migrants started to come, crossing the Mediterranean, and when the flow is going to increase, people will start talking about it seriously. And also, thanks also to Médecins Sans Frontières. 2 days ago, they spoke to the Security Council, Mr. Christophe. He spoke to the Security Council in order to at least reflect what is going on. Others, they spoke in UK. Now you are speaking here in Switzerland. After tomorrow, the same film will be presented inside the United Nations and the Human Rights Council, and this is all of it is our efforts which are going to draw the attention of the world. The question is how to galvanize this political will in order to force the warring parties and their allied militias and their supporters from the external, and to stop this war, to sit down and negotiate. How to trigger this? And how all the people are mentioning the root causes, but nobody is targeting the root causes. It's not just matter of mentioning it. We have to identify how we are going to make to at least to uproot the causes of this war. Merci. Thank you very much.
Merci. Et on va prendre, par contre, vous faites vraiment.
Thank you very much. Now, please do be brief, because we're already over time.
I really appreciated very much the film and the message it has come through. It have come through quite nicely. I think it's very important to say this. Since independence, we have had about 75 years of independence of the Sudan, of which only 7 years were under civilian rules. The rest of it was all under military regimes. Now, when you say military in Sudan, you have to understand who are these and what they are, what's their mental capacity and their competence and their ability to lead or govern. In Sudan, through the educational system, we take the top students and they go and study medicine and engineering and economy and so on. And the very last leftovers of it go to the army. And the army trains them for 3 years and become leaders and so on. And they become leaders of the Sudan. They govern the Sudan. So I think what we have is the consequence of a catastrophe of leadership. We have a crisis of leadership, a crisis of management, and that is what we have to have an attempt to correct. The international scene.
Sorry, sir. We are running out of time, and time is even overlapped. So may you ask your question, please?
Yes, I have a very simple question. What is the way by which the international community, since we are here in international community, can influence the setup with which countries like Sudan and many others in Africa and the developing countries to put the right people in the leadership, to put the right people in the control of the country and lead it and manage it. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe, pardon, est-ce que quelqu'un peut répondre?
Thank you. Would somebody like to answer? Rawia, would you like to?
I truly believe in cinema and the role of cinema. I believe that cinema is able to make change. Regardless of this change, that it will make change and impact. With the film Khartoum, the first screening was in the United States in the Sundance, and after the movie, we also made a campaign for influence where we targeted civil society and the Sudanese society in the US. The goal was to reflect what's happening in Sudan through our film. There were meetings by this campaign with influencers where we try to reflect the issues that were not covered by the media. Also in Berlin, we tried to screen the film not only in the cinema, but to reach the civil society in Berlin. And we tried to speak about Sudan and the situation in Sudan. And so I see that this movie, this film, that cinema is able to make an impact and to spread our voice to the international community. شكرا. أعتقد أنه لدينا
To end here, we would like to answer the person who asked a question outside. But I don't think there's only Sudan that has a problem with leadership right now. This problem is everywhere. I wanted to thank you. Just one last thing. Please don't forget who want to pick up the little flyer with the QR code outside the room. It's to help Lucane and Wilson. Sorry, I had a blank there. I couldn't remember his name. Too many emotions. Thank you so much once again, and thank you to the panel.